Do you know what an NFT is? Me neither. And how does it affect us as musicians? Is this helpful? I hope so. We have Brian Leung from Treebud Academy on the podcast today to break down what are NFTs and how can it help the career of a musician. All About the Song is now.
This is All About the Song.
Welcome to the 134th episode of All About the Song. I am your host, Michael McDonnell, and thank you for joining us. On the podcast today, we have Brian Leung, and we're going to talk about what an NFT is. An NFT, a non-fungible token, has been, it's been in the news with regards to sports cards, with regards to selling a moment. It's a digital fingerprint on an item that we give value to. And a lot of musicians have been using this as, I don't even know how to use it, but they've been selling music as NFTs. There was a band that we had on the podcast. It was Gord Pryor of Blue Bones. I think it was about 5 episodes ago. And Brian's song was given out as an NFT or being sold as an NFT. Anyways, it was really interesting, but I realized that I really didn't know anything about it. And the point of this podcast isn't really about the business side. It's about the passion of writing songs and music and its, interpersonal meaning with you. Not so much the business side, but I think NFTs are something that we're all hearing so much about. And I thought it would be cool to go through with Brian what an NFT is and how it relates to music, how it relates to the artist. And we go through some ideas as to how you could use it for yourself too. But it was a very interesting conversation. It was very technical. We did keep it as music-centric as possible. But I think that, it's a new world. We're all on lockdowns looking for new ways to monetize music. And this is definitely a new frontier and something that any artist or creator should be aware of and to see how it could help them. Brian has Treebud Academy. It's his YouTube channel that he uses to teach young entrepreneurs or upstarting entrepreneurs about how to, capitalize on their dollar or how to make it work, how to grow and fulfill your dreams. It's a really great thing that Brian does through his channel. We met because he put out a Facebook post in an entrepreneurial group on Facebook, and he connected me with Daniel Benjamin. And we got Tal and Dana Pierce, our editor, all together around Brian and I meeting, and Brian kind of expanding the idea of what this podcast could be. It was audio only. Now we're doing video. And we can't do a lot because we're in a lockdown currently in Ontario. But it has been fun to continue to have someone that I can bounce off ideas with about this podcast and about music stuff, and have someone look at it from another perspective, from a more of a business background, and kind of extrapolate what an artist is trying to do and how to focus it. So this conversation is maybe an artistic focus laneway that we don't usually go down, but we will again with Brian because I think it's very insightful. Anyways, I'll get out of my way. So here we are, episode 134 of All About the Song, featuring Brian Leung of Treebud Academy. Brian Leung of Treebud Academy, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's I've been a big fan of the show, obviously, and I've been a big fan of you for a very long time. That's why I signed up to help. But yeah, it's been this wonderful journey working with you, with Tal, rest of the crew, Dana and Dan. It's such a fun journey, even though we're kind of apart now. Can't wait for this pandemic to be over, or this lockdown to be over, and we can see each other again and work together in person again.
Well, it's really unfortunate that that being said, I think that it's really great we were able to connect in I don't remember what it was called at this point, but COVID cases were very low and we are able to kind of establish some ideas of what we would like to do with this podcast in video form. We did 7 podcasts as a unit, and I think that it's going to work in our favor now that our lockdown life has resumed to have to or be allowed to daydream about what the video of this podcast is ultimately going to be. But yes, Brian, I absolutely miss doing these episodes with you in person. So it is nice today to have you as a guest. One of the things that I have, and we have tried to discuss this in some podcasts with Brian, the topic of NFTs are so big and vast, it's hard to throw it into an intro of an episode and really understand what it is. We had a artist, Gord Pryor of Blue Bones, on an episode of All About the Song. He was the first Canadian artist, or his band Blue Bones were the first Canadian artists to release an NFT in Canada. They used a single and a music video. Before I say anything else, Brian, maybe we should just start at the very beginning. What is an NFT and what does this mean to musicians?
Well, first of all, I have to say, being on the other side of the camera now, on my own channel at Treebud Academy. Sorry for that plug, but not sorry. All I have is just admiration to how well you do the hosting. It's not easy. And like I said, now that I'm on the other side of the camera, talking to people, interviewing people, I start to recognize and sort of admire your penchant for it and how amazing you are at this job. So kudos to you, first of all. And to kind of answer your question, NFT stands for non-fungible token. And the concept of fungibility is an economics concept. Something that's, I'm actually, in my undergrad, I was deeply passionate and interested about economics. And the concept of fungibility just means how interchangeable something is. And if something is non-fungible, then that means it's non-interchangeable. So for example, something that is perfectly fungible is a $5 bill. This example is used all over the internet. You watch YouTube videos on it, and many people talk about it in this way. So whether or not I give you a particular $5 bill shouldn't matter to you if you're purchasing something, right? It's perfectly usable in any context, anywhere. But now let's say if, when I was a kid, I collected Pokemon cards, right? And who knew those Pokemon cards would jump up and skyrocket in value? But a part of the value comes in its condition. So if its condition is, not worn out, if it's kept like pristine, then technically that particular card is non-fungible because the value is in its condition. Right? So if I trade you one Pokemon card versus another, it's not perfectly interchangeable because the conditions could be different, and therefore the value of that card is different. Whereas the value of a $5 bill is still $5, no matter what type of bill or which bill in particular that I give to you. So far, so good?
Yes, I understand that.
And I think when you talk about the non-fungible token, now becomes a situation where we talk about blockchain, right? Blockchain is just kind of, you can imagine almost like a little train. Each train carriage or the train car itself houses information. So, and there's always a sequence to the trains, right? And the idea of a blockchain is that it's all this information stored and verified in a decentralized way, where everyone else has visibility into everyone else's information to kind of fact check each other. And it's almost like peer reviewing, making sure this transaction that I record in this particular section of the train or the blockchain is a legitimate transaction, and it's recorded in a sequence that cannot be altered once it's already filed into the chain. So these two are the main concepts that kind of like gets very technical. And now we can talk a bit about sort of the high level concepts. And I actually came across this video that talks about the use of NFTs. Actually, let's take a step back. What's your fondest like music memory, for example?
Off the top of my head, summer 2003, my parents' basement, pushing the pool table into the corner, bringing over my friends' drums, and all the neighborhood kids brought their amps. We set up the basement to just jam all summer. There was an amp, a guitar for everyone. That's all we did was we rode our bikes, we sweat, we played music in the basement.
And do you remember your first live concert?
Yes. St. Mike's Rock Night, the spring before, so spring 2003, St. Mike's Gymnasium.
There are so many people who share experience or have like experiences like this. So for example, like the first Burning Man, right? The first Burn, their first, live concert or a particular live concert or an experience that they shared with a loved one, for example. And very often, like, do you still have the ticket stubs? Do you?
I do, yeah. I have flyers from early shows, pins.
And merch?
I have merch, yeah. At the bottom of like my t-shirt drawer, I have all my sentimental band t-shirts that we printed out.
Exactly. So here's the thing. The concept and sort of the idea behind what an NFT is not new. And there's a very analog version of this. It's called certificate of authentications.
Okay.
Right? Or certificate of authenticity. Right. So if you purchase luxury jewelry, for example, an engagement ring or a wedding ring or a luxury watch, et cetera, you would get a certificate saying, okay, this is where the diamond came from. This is where it was mined. It was sourced, sustainably and ethically, et cetera. Or like if you purchase a watch, maybe from a jeweler or secondhand, it comes with a certificate saying, oh, this is the genuine item. An NFT can be used in the exact same way where there's a kind of like a digital marker, as digital certificate saying that, okay, this thing is what it says it is.
Okay.
Right. And I think an interesting case to use an NFT is almost like, think about the analog versions of these things. It could be to immortalize a moment, an experience, or it could be to provide a unique and kind of what would the word be? An irreplaceable memento or an item.
Okay.
And I think NBA Top Shots is a huge example to follow, right?
Digital basketball cards.
Exactly. So they take clips and moments of like a game or NBA history, etc., and they digitally certify that you are the owner of this token, which represents this moment. It doesn't mean you actually have the broadcast rights to that moment, so you can't take that clip and be like, oh, I'm going to sell it and reproduce it and,
Okay.
burn a CD of it and sell it. The NBA is still going to come after you if you do that.
Right. Okay.
But what you can do is now, let's say, collect certain moments. So maybe, the career highlights of a certain player.
Right.
And then now you have kind of like a digital version of a certificate saying you have this collection, and you can pass that along to people. And then because the chain of ownership is kind of can be traced back through the blockchain, then anyone who purchased these certificates from anybody else can trace back, okay, this is legit because I can see the entire history of ownership of this clip.
Right. So I heard recently that LeBron James Top Shot? Or these
Shot. Yeah.
Top Shot. So the LeBron James Top Shot clips or things that he's part of are perhaps the highest selling. And I could be wrong with this, so apologize if I am. But
I wouldn't be surprised if it was the case.
So people are
people
collecting people are collecting memories or moments of him.
Mm-hmm.
Could this be his Air Jordan equivalent, where Michael Jordan has transcended the shoe market?
Mm-hmm.
LeBron James could do the same, but instead of it being a very rare sneaker or a limited print, it could be a moment in time that someone owns and trades.
Yes, I absolutely think it can be.
Wow.
And I may touch upon this later, but it all depends on the market, right? Like, it's only as valuable as what someone is willing to pay for it. Because technically there's no inherent value to this. And that's a whole different debate, but we won't get into it. But going to your question about the Air Jordan, is exactly the analog example again is where we can sort of draw inspiration from.
Right.
And I have this theory where technology changes, but human behavior and humans don't. So it's almost like you see a repeating pattern in quote unquote history, but it's actually just people doing the same thing as people would do. But something I want to touch upon on this concept is, let's say you're a prominent, athlete.
Okay.
The shoe itself has value, but once you sign that shoe or wear that shoe, it becomes much more valuable.
Right.
Because now it's a one of one, right, or one of few.
Right.
And when you import that into the digital sphere, like you said, the clips of LeBron James' career or different moments in his career or games, that is the same thing as, okay, this is something digital. We want to make it so that it's, we ensure that this is an authentic item that someone's trading.
Yeah.
And then from there, you can buy or sell it just like a shoe.
Right. Okay.
But if I go in and buy a pair of Jordans or LeBron's shoe and fake the signature, it's totally plausible, right?
Yeah.
There's no real way to, short of like a picture of showing him sign it and giving it to you, there's no sure way to prove a shoe signature, for example, is authentic.
And that's why you have like signature aficionados, where someone is flown in from around the world who is a LeBron James signature expert and can say, well, the arch in the J is specific. Yes, I can say that this is probably his signature.
Watch Pawn Stars?
Yes, I have seen it. But I also, and I appreciate that art on that person's career. I have seen some people that have made incredible livings out of being the aficionado of a certain subject. So it's a really cool way to work. But I guess in this case, you don't have some sort of expert. There's nothing left to guesswork or copy because the blockchain is infallible?
Yep. I won't like phrase it that way where the blockchain is invaluable. Like the blockchain in design is so that it's dispersed. So the risk is kind of spread out over the public, basically, thousands and thousands and sometimes even millions of people.
Okay.
Keeping track at the same time and validating things at the same time. So it's almost that case of like, if 5 people come together and say, yes, this is true, then okay. But if 5 million people come together and say, this is true, then it's kind of like, okay, this is more credible, right?
Yeah.
And if everyone who has access to this vets each other, then it becomes a scenario of like, okay, it's almost impossible to coordinate all these people independently to say that this is true. So
Right.
this, in the absence of doubt, we can only say this is true. That type of thing.
And just because we're on Zoom right now, just in case, the word I was saying was infallible, not invaluable, but infallible, meaning like it cannot. It's like the term of God in a sense, or a referee in terms of a game. Like it is definitely. There's no doubt about it, let's say. And this is a really interesting thing. And we've seen this type of, I guess, other types of blockchains that we're starting to get used to in regular culture, like Bitcoin, for example, or Ethereum. These types of things are becoming more and more. And I don't want to cut you off on your train, but as you had said too, that these types of trends are cyclical. It's really about what we as society put value into that makes it of value.
Yeah, I think touching back on this like cyclical thing, something that I want to caution everybody about is this is almost exactly like the dot-com bubble where people started speculating on the value of certain things. And because people are speculating, it becomes like this hot potato contest of like, who's left holding the bag at the end of the cycle.
Got you. Because it could actually not be valuable.
Exactly. But another thing to take into account is it doesn't mean URLs are invaluable. So like have no value. It's just it's not maybe as high as we think it is right now. So just like how you hear about URLs being sold for tens and millions of dollars back then, it doesn't mean that still doesn't happen, but it's a lot rarer now. And most URLs now still sell for a hefty sum. For particular URLs that you can go for, there are some that can sell for hundreds of dollars, some that can sell for thousands of dollars, right? So it's not like the value's not there, but it's just maybe not as high as we think it is. So it's a bit inflated right now, I think. But the technology is just here to stay. Just like how the internet, that famous phrase that someone coined, like, oh, the internet's just a fad. Well, no, the internet's here to stay. Lots of people are saying, cryptocurrency and the blockchain technology is just a fad. I don't think so. I think it's going to stay for long term, just like how the internet is here to stay long term. And we're viewing it through the same lens.
Well, it seems that a blockchain, in comparison to paperwork articling the history of something, there's no way to manipulate that type of information if it's part of a blockchain in a sense.
I think there are definitely ways to manipulate it, but the fundamental tenets of cryptocurrency is security, and and that's sort of built upon in decentralization, and that's built upon that blockchain. So technically, it's secure. Just by definition, it's secure. Just by definition, it's decentralized. So and therein inherently lies some of the security. but without getting too much detail into like the technicals, I think you're 100% right. Like the need for detailing something's history. So, for example, like buying secondhand cars. Like,
Right.
yes, you get a Carfax, but then imagine the ability to. It's almost like a browser history of the car, going through each owner, the mileage that each owner racked up, the service history, any accidents or wear and tear. Imagine having all of that in a digital form that you can sort of pass on to the next person, and
Right.
that person can validate through the entire history based on this open network of information. I think that's very, very valuable, and totally translatable to artists.
Well, and I'm glad we began this with talking about sports because, and I've said this on this podcast before for other subjects, sports is so structured, it's transparent. Everyone knows kind of what the dollar figures are, what the value is. So it's really great at explaining things in comparison to the arts, in comparison to music.
Mm-hmm.
How does an NFT help? Let's use a specific example for a songwriter, let's say, working on songs, looking for a new avenue because it's COVID and it's a lockdown. They can't go out and play live shows. And all of a sudden, songs that have lost their value because of streaming sites and just the volume, the amount of songs that come out on a daily basis. How does an NFT help a songwriter? How does it, and can it become of value and be monetized?
That's a great question. I think, to be quite honest, I may not even have the right answer or the full answer, but here are some of my thoughts on this topic.
Okay.
First of all, NFTs is a great way to track royalties because each use of something is posted to the public ledger so that you can trace back all the way to the first owner, right? The first so it could be, in this case, the author of a particular song or the writer of a particular song. And you can set it up, and like the arts, the digital art scenario actually has this already inherently baked in. You can set it up in such a way that you get a commission based on every sale of this particular song. So each time someone, because for example, if I sell you a Pokemon card,
yes,
or like a hockey card, and you make money off the next sale. So I sell it to you for $1,000, then you turn around and sell it for $5,000. You make $4,000, right?
Yes.
I don't see any of that $4,000 because I passed it on to you and you sold it on to the next person. I don't even know whom you sold it to.
Right.
Right. But in an NFT scenario, I sell it to you. I can then track whether or not you sell it.
Okay.
And I can create a system where on every sale thereafter, I get 5%, I get 10%, whatever that percentage is.
Interesting.
Right? So now that I sell it to you for 1,000, you sell it for 5,000. And if the scenario becomes a 10% commission, $400 gets taken out of your transaction and paid back to me.
And that would be something that you would agree to on the first transaction.
Exactly. Or like as you set up the NFT, you can set it up in that way, and whoever's buying it would know how it's set up.
Right. So if you were the artist and you have let's say a song as an NFT, you determine the value that you want to sell your NFT at, but you could, as the song, if the song continues to pass along, and let's say you become the next biggest artist in the world, and all of a sudden this NFT of, I'm trying to think of an example of what it would be, but like for me, I remember buying a CD at Sonic Boom in Toronto, and it had a 16-year-old Jack White on the bass. And he was just like filling in for this band. And obviously this CD is now extremely valued because Jack White turned out to be one of the biggest artists in rock and roll, especially at that time. So it was a rarity. But let's say this band released it as an NFT. Now all of a sudden, for one reason or another, it's more valuable than it was when they made it. The EFT and you as an artist could continue as the NFT climbs, not EFT, the NFT continues to climb, make more money and more money and more money. So you're generating royalties almost similar to a former model where you'd have a song on the radio, and since people were listening to it, the stations would pay a royalty to the artist.
Yeah, it's very similar to royalties in the sense that you get sort of like your cut of the sale.
Right.
But you have to remember that's the value of an NFT is its like rarity, how unique it is. So let's say you write a song and you create 500 NFTs for it, and meaning in the entire world for all of time, these 500 NFTs are the first edition copies, right?
Okay.
Exactly the same scenario as like first edition books, first edition cards, limited edition runs of cars, watches, etc. The value and the increase in value is how rare it becomes over time, and how each assuming each successive sale, subsequent sale of that item becomes more and more valuable because people are willing to pay more to get it off your hands.
So an NFT is more like, if I were a painter, it's not the painting, it's the print.
Yes.
Okay. Because there's not.
But you can
really...
also make it. You can also make it the painting itself.
Right. So okay. So you could sell. Let's make it music. So you could have 500 copies of the song to be sold as NFTs, but you could also have the master copy of the song sold as an NFT on its own.
Yep. And you can also still distribute the song digitally for people to stream, playback, or whatever. But the 500 NFTs that you created are valuable in its because it's kind of like the certified copy.
Okay.
Right. And that's why I think I don't know if we released that recording, but in a previous recording we chatted about this, where if you can make it a bit more special in terms of like releasing an maybe a video or some other assets connected to that, and package it as like kind of a limited run of a bundle, for example,
right?
Then it becomes more valuable, and you get sort of like both sides, the mass distribution and also this like limited run of something.
So like Austin Matthews, for example, who's the star Toronto Maple Leaf, he has released a NFT hockey card of himself at auction, but it includes tickets to a Leafs game, a Zoom call with Austin Matthews, a stick or gloves or something like that. So there's like a bundle of things. So, and I was thinking that they probably did that maybe to attract someone who's not thinking that the NFT has a value yet, but they want to go to the Scotiabank Arena and see the team, and they've always bid on tickets at silent auctions. So I almost took it as those types of things to make this transition more palatable.
That, because I think people are a very like fundamental problem that people kind of haven't wrapped their heads around yet. But to be honest, I've fully embraced is what's the difference between this NFT version versus the version that I can stream, right? To a lot of people, it may not be the same.
Right.
But it goes back to like, what's the difference between this particular run of, let's say, I get really nerdy when it comes to cars, but for a particular model of a BMW, right?
Yeah.
There are, on the outside, the bodywork is exactly the same, but between the European version versus the American version, maybe the chassis is a little different, or maybe the suspension system is different. And this is also very prevalent in old Japanese cars as well. Like the North American version may be completely different than the European version. So, and it drives differently, right? But for people who may not understand the technical aspects, they look at, it's the same car, right?
Right. Why is one more
And there's
expensive than
inherent
the other?
value between one version versus the other.
Right.
So but it's a bit more difficult to grasp in concept because something digital is it's so new in the whole human experience. But I think as time goes by, people will start recognizing the importance of like a digital fingerprint on something, and then eventually owning, for example, the NFT version of a song versus I have the streaming version of a song will be completely different.
It's really interesting. It's like, I'm trying to think, it's like analogies. It's almost like you could own an NFT of a painting, but it hangs in a museum. And
yes, you can. Yeah.
It'll never be in your house, but you own it.
Mm-hmm.
But you own, as you said, the digital footprint or the digital fingerprint of something, and because we put value into it. So this is like basically, as you and I grew up pre-internet, it was all about stuff. Everyone had stuff. And now we're moving away from that on an artistic level. I'll try to bring it back to music as much as I can, but gear, for example, always about the gear. Everyone was like, oh, you got to have this, you got to have this type of amp. And in the early 2000s, it was, you had to have these types of things to almost have value amongst your peers or to look a certain way, of level of professionalism per se. So big amps, so then you need a big van, and now you don't have to have that type of stuff, but we still as a society need to put value into things. The concept is that we physically don't need to have it or hold it or, contain it per se.
I think that's a great analogy. And I think because we live in the physical world, so it's hard for us to grasp the unique nature of NFTs. This is a prime example. Like a particular hockey card, can be exactly the same as. So actually, no. I actually recently watched a documentary on 1,000 Miles. Like the story behind the song, and the producer of the song took out the original CD of that was sent to him. I forgot the artist's name. Jeez.
Is this the song like, and I will walk 500 miles?
No. Behind the song. This is all right, Dana. Sorry, you're gonna probably have to cut this
sorry,
out.
Dana.
Thousand Years. Sorry. Oh wait, no. Story of Vanessa Carlton. 1,000 Miles. So I was right.
Oh yes. Okay.
So okay. So I recently saw a documentary about the story behind 1,000 Miles by Vanessa Carlton, and the producer of the song took out a CD, her original mixtape that she sent to him, or sent to the label at least, and that song itself is a digital copy of something, although it manifests in physical form. But imagine if you can stamp it and say, okay, this is the first iteration of this song,
Right.
and now you can own own the NFT for it, and sort of show people that you own this.
Right.
And it's almost the same concept as like owning a luxury watch or like a limited edition of a particular watch, where the movement is the same, but the dial may be slightly different. But from like, from afar, you're going to look at the watch and be like, oh, it looks like every other version of that watch, right? But in itself, it's valuable because it has a limited run. Just like the first pair of Air Jordans that was produced,
Right.
worn by Michael Jordan on court. Like technically, it's just an old pair of shoes, but
we've put value into it.
If you're able to prove and show that this is the pair that he wore during that game, then it becomes much more valuable than all the other pairs of Air Jordans created after that.
I wanted to ask you if you see any harm or issue or negative side to this. I kind of feel like because of our conversation, your answer will be no, but maybe I'm going to ask it anyways. Is there any risk or harm going down this road to basically value nothing?
I think the whole question about, there's two ways I'm going to answer this question. So first, I'm going to answer like value nothing. So I personally believe it's not nothing. It's like this digital form of something. Right?
Yes. Still makes
and I think
you feel.
I think it's harmful to not recognize the value of something digital.
Right.
And a very clear example of it is like the money in your bank account, right? It's literally just zeros and ones, like data on a computer.
Yeah.
But we have value in it because people will trade it, right?
Yeah.
When was the last time you had $1,000 in cash on you?
No comment. No, I'm just kidding.
It's like, oh, I have it right here.
Yeah, I know. Right. Oh, never mind. Sorry.
It's kind of like the same thing where something digital can have value. I think that's the concept that society and human beings will eventually come to grasp. And I think it's the next generation that's growing up natively digital and natively knowing, like having all these things accessible to them, that they will understand the value of this. And I think that's where it's important to kind of pave the road for them so that they're able to fully utilize this technology in their lifetime. And the second way I'm going to answer this is it actually is very harmful if you think about what makes an NFT valuable. It's its scarcity, right?
Right.
So the route I want artists and musicians to think about is not to like the Wu-Tang example is a prime example. Like they created that one album. It's only one copy of it.
Yeah.
Right. They have all the prerogative to do so, but now it's kind of like not democratizing art. It can get a bit philosophical here, but the idea is I grew up not valuing art a lot at all. But now as I mature and understand the value of art in society and human culture, I feel like it's important to make it so that it's not so like you want to create value, but at the same time, you don't want to create artificial value by scarcity.
Right.
And a prime example of that is diamonds. Like diamonds are not rare or as rare as people think they are. And I think it's a silly notion to spend 3 months worth of someone's salary to buy a piece of rock that is artificially inflated in value because someone's manipulating the supply.
Right.
This is a whole controversial topic, but I'm going to That's my hot take. I don't want like music and art to go down that route where someone's artificially controlling the distribution and the supply of music to make it inherently valuable.
Right.
Or like artificially valuable.
Because it
but
won't.
That's not that. There's nothing to stop.
Oh no, sorry.
There's nothing to
saying.
stop an artist to. Yeah, there's nothing to stop an artist to make a limited run of something and then mass produce and distribute another thing.
Right.
And I think that is the model that we should follow. Same thing in like the collecting cards business, right? You do a limited run and then you do the unlimited run.
Gotcha.
So that, you know, for the collectors, there's still the market for them. But for the, you know, average consumers and, you know, the casual, more people who would just casually enjoy a particular thing, they can still have that mass-produced version.
Right.
Right. I think this is the perfect balance. And again, you can still leverage NFTs. It's just don't be evil.
Well, speaking of evil, let's say you're a musician and you're a songwriter and you're nothing special. Let's say, there's a demand, but not a crazy demand. You're writing songs. It's a pandemic. You have been limited to how you can put out your art. You could even suggest that a lot of the methods that have been leading up to, you know, a lockdown, pandemic, quarantine were a little antiquated to begin with. Music is a model that has not really changed or is reluctantly changed. As a person, let's say me, for example. I write a song. I want to put it out as an NFT. Should I do it? How do I do it? And will it have any real benefit for me to do so?
I think absolutely. And I actually first talked about, you know, how artists can use NFTs in two ways. So I talked about one way. Now I want to talk about the second way. Perfect way to segue into this second option. I think, let me ask you a question. We talked briefly about your memorable music experiences.
Right.
Have you ever been to a show, gotten like special treatments or, you know, a special experience at a particular show, gotten like a limited edition merch?
Yes. Yes, I have.
Right. I remember hanging out with a few friends of mine, and I can't remember where actually. I was a bit. I had too much fun that night, and I don't remember much of it. But I remember hanging out in the green room of some sort, hanging out with my friends who were performing there, and it was just an amazing and fun experience.
Yeah,
I think now that artists are doing more shows online, et cetera, releasing things digitally, that's been kind of the norm in the industry the past 10 years. I think an important thing is now taking that experience or that exclusive experience and certifying it digitally. So,
okay.
Shout outs to Mike Sleeth and Shawn Mendes. The Wonder documentary was amazing. And I think, and you know, we also talked about the Coldplay documentary, right?
Yes.
Now imagine if you have this recording of, you know, a backstage session or like, you know, the warm-up session to a particular show, right?
Right.
Imagine having the digital copy of like, you know, Live Aid, that one Live Aid, you know, that's Live Aid concert that's kind of etched in history.
Right.
With Freddie Mercury, Queen. Imagine getting the digital, you know, copy of the video of them warming up, or like that, you know, just before Freddie walked onto the stage.
The VIP experience. Like,
turn that into an NFT.
Right.
And now you're the certified, you know,
owner of
this
experience.
NFT that represents this moment in music history.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
Or like, if you have this NFT, you can gain access to like this exclusive clip that cannot be downloaded, cannot be reproduced.
Okay.
And only this NFT can get, because there's like a security key that can link to a particular video or, a website of some sort. And this asset, this video or like whatever it may be, can be a unique experience for that person. Right? So taking that VIP backstage experience,
Yeah.
turning it digital, and now certifying it with an NFT that only the person who has that NFT can access that particular experience.
So
I think that would be a cool way to distribute art or connect with your fans.
yeah. Wow, I'm gonna have to listen to this podcast. But yeah, I get it. Like I kind of understand what you're talking about. So you're saying basically almost bottling up that experience that excuse me, that you'd have. Sorry.
Me too. I got a bit of a
Excuse
frog.
me. You got me so excited. So basically, what you're saying is an NFT can bottle the experience that you have, that rare moment that you cherish forever. You could, even if you're not there, you could bottle up its essence per se. And because it has value to you, you could own it and it could be yours.
So you played with Tal and Jimmy of Kadima, I think like last month?
Yeah, at the Rose Theater in Brampton.
Right. And that was a digital event, right? A
Yes,
virtual
it was a
event.
digital event.
So imagine if I love Tal, I love his energy, I love him personally. Imagine him, and Jimmy's amazing too, but I haven't had many interactions with him. Imagine if Tal had like a little POV cam or like, did a vlog, for example, a vlog style video of him.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we're going to Rose there. We're going to be performing. We're setting up now. There's our rehearsal, sound checking and whatnot. Hey, look, it's Mike here. Jimmy's here. And imagine that type of like energy and experience. Now it's digital, right?
Yeah.
And you sell 500 NFTs for people who are fans.
Okay.
They can access this exclusive content. And I think it's valuable. I think it's interesting to people who are fans, who love their art and music, to get this other version of themselves, like this other side of the performance, and kind of like a peek behind the curtains, right?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I think this might be enough for us to digest. But Brian, wow, there's so much. Thank you again for doing the podcast, because there's so much information about this. And my big thing with artistry, and I'm going to talk about this in the intro, so I'll be brief, but my thing about being a musician is being a musician, not being a business around music. But you have to also understand what's going on. And NFTs are something that have added a level of control for the artist to create value and to maximize on value later on. So there's lots of artists, for example, that had really shitty record contracts and then became massive millionaires and spent lots of money in litigation to get their ownership back. An NFT-based artistic lifestyle could allow you to be in control of everything in a validated sense from the get-go or from whenever you begin. And you can control your destiny in a sense.
Yeah, and I think with artists and musicians, it's, for better or for worse, mass distribution has helped, but also hurt, like, the art of music.
Yes.
I don't know if, it may get a bit too philosophical, but to be a balance between like scarcity and just like people devaluing music because it's so readily accessible.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's an argument to be made to fine tune it so as that it's not on either side of the extreme, where I feel accessible and the consumer doesn't value the people put into music. And then to the other extreme where like, okay, if you only create one of something, then it doesn't really add value to society and culture.
Right.
So there has to be like a middle ground in there somewhere that can benefit both the business side of music and also kind of like the cultural side, but also ultimately, like you said, giving more control and more value to the artists themselves.
Wow. Wow, this is a lot to digest. Well, Brian, as we've hit the end, I will ask you like I always ask everyone. First, and before I do that, I'll step all over myself. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm excited to have you on again. I think that this is a fantastic type of conversation to have on this podcast where we can break down things that are perhaps beyond the average bass player's level of understanding. But
You're
what's
selling
next?
yourself short.
Well, maybe one day. Hey, every day you just try to learn something new, and
For sure, yeah.
this is something that I think has been seismic, and also it's something that went from this seemingly new thing to an explosion of NFTs all over all sorts of artistic communities, the sports community. It's just become this interesting revenue stream, and I think that. And I hope that this podcast helps artists understand some of the ways that they could use NFTs to the value and to the longevity of their careers.
For sure. And I'd love to come back on because there's other things that I want to talk about, like for example, like the convergence of all the technology available. I think
Yes.
right now is the most exciting time to be alive because of things that are happening in the tech world. But yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I'd like to thank Brian for being on the podcast. Be sure to check out his YouTube channel, Treebud Academy. And after you do that, you should check out ours, the Sounds Like Songs Network. We release our podcasts every Tuesday, so make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button, and do so for Treebud Academy too. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions for a guest you'd like to hear on a podcast, send us an email, allaboutthesongpodcast@gmail.com. Our website for past episodes is www.allaboutthesongpodcast.com. Check us out on Instagram. Follow us there. That's the best social medium for this podcast. And if you listen to the podcast, Apple, Spotify, everywhere that we listen to podcasts, everywhere that you listen to podcasts, we are there. Rate and subscribe when you do go there to listen to another episode of All About the Song. So for Brian Leung, I am Michael McDonnell. Episode 134 of All About the Song is in the books. We'll see you next week.